In a charged moment on the world stage, President Donald Trump warned that if Vladimir Putin refuses a 30-day pause in Ukraine's fighting, Russia will face a financial storm like no other. The promise of devastating repercussions hung in the air, a threat aimed squarely at those who continue the clash. Could this be the turning point to halt further bloodshed? During a candid discussion about his team's relentless work to end a conflict that has scarred countless lives, Trump warned that the current path might even spark a global catastrophe. "We might very well be staring down the possibility of World War III, he remarked, leaving listeners to wonder, is history about to repeat itself? When pressed about the steps the U.S. might take to steer Russia toward peace, he leaned in with a steady gaze and said, "There are moves on the financial front that wouldn't be too pleasant. I can hit Russia where it hurts with some harsh money measures. But honestly, I'd rather see peace than unleash that." His voice carried a mix of resolve and reluctance. Was this a promise of protection or a looming threat? He pressed on, adding, "Yes, financially we could do things that'd be really rough for Russia, a true financial earthquake. But I'm not eager to take that route." The air practically crackled with tension as he hinted that the power of economic pressure might be used as a last resort. Will diplomacy prevail, or is a storm about to break? These stern words came right after top officials, Secretary of State Marco Rubio and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, announced that Ukraine is on board for a 30-day ceasefire, if Russia agrees to. The fate of this pause in the fighting now rests solely with the Kremlin. Is Russia ready to join the chorus of peace, or will it continue to fuel the flames? Not long ago, Trump had already sent a sharp trade warning to Russia online, a clear shift from earlier days when he had praised Putin's wit and even admired the Russian viewpoint. This sudden change of tone leaves us asking, what drove this dramatic flip? Just 2 weeks back, an intense meeting unfolded in the Oval Office with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, where Trump's frustration was unmistakable. The heated discussion was a stark reminder of the high stakes in this conflict. Could that encounter have set off the chain of events we're witnessing now? Recall that the U.S. had already slammed Russia with a host of economic sanctions, targeting both the nation and its top oligarchs, ever since Russia seized Crimea in 2014 and later launched a full-scale invasion in 2022. With the pressure mounting, every decision now carries enormous weight. Will further sanctions finally shift the balance? Now, the ball is in Russia's court as Trump ramps up the economic heat on what he calls the aggressor. He noted that his envoy, Steve Witkoff, is heading to Moscow for critical talks. Will these discussions open a door to de-escalation, or are they just another move in a high-stakes game? In a moment of unexpected levity amid the tension, Trump teased J.D. Vance about his quirky shamrock socks during a meeting with the Irish leader at the White House. Even as jokes flew, the gravity of the situation was never far behind. Is humor simply a mask for the deeper strategies at play? Turning to his close colleague, Trump said with a hint of a smile, "We've got people heading over to Moscow. What's your take on this, since you're so involved?" Vance quickly responded, "We're talking both over the phone and in person with our team in the coming days." Like the president said, Ukraine's ready to pause the fighting, and now we're watching to see if we can bring Russia on board too. Can these ongoing conversations pave the way to peace? When asked if he really believed Putin would honor a ceasefire, given past broken promises, Trump was frank. "We haven't had a deep conversation with him yet, we just got the news. We'll know more soon. I've received some positive signals, but a few kind words don't change the gravity of the situation. This is serious business, one that might even spiral into World War III. The question now lingers, is the world teetering on the edge?" Just this past Tuesday, following discussions in Saudi Arabia, Ukraine agreed to a U.S. plan for a 30-day ceasefire with Russia, and shortly after, America resumed military aid and critical intelligence sharing with Kyiv. This renewed commitment sparks hope, but can it turn the tide? Shortly afterward, Secretary of State Rubio made it clear that the next move belongs to Russia. "We're laying our offer on the table. Ukraine is ready to lower the guns and start talking. Now it's up to Russia to give a yes or a no," he declared. Will Moscow seize this chance to step away from conflict? In earlier remarks, Putin had dismissed any short-term pause as merely giving Ukraine an edge. He once stated, "When settling this, we're not talking about a quick break, a chance to regroup and rearm. We need long-term peace." Has his position changed now that the stakes are higher than ever? Yet, by turning down this offer, Russia risks pushing the U.S. further away at a time when Trump has taken several steps to improve ties between the two nations. Meanwhile, the president hasn't held back on pressuring NATO allies and even has launched trade skirmishes with longtime partners. Is this a clever strategy to forge a new path, or is it just adding fuel to the fire? On March 7th, after a rough exchange with Zelensky led to a pause in security aid and key intelligence sharing, Trump again raised the idea of harsh sanctions on Russia. On his online platform, he boldly wrote, "Since Russia is really hammering Ukraine on the battlefield, I am seriously considering huge banking sanctions, extra tariffs, and more until we lock in a ceasefire and a final peace agreement." His words echo like a countdown. Is this the catalyst for a long-awaited change? He then urged, "Russia and Ukraine, come to the table right now. Time is running out." Thanks. As the relentless sounds of missile strikes and drone attacks continue to echo over Ukrainian towns and civilian areas, one must ask, will the unyielding barrage force a much-needed pause? In a dramatic twist just hours before U.S. talks in Saudi Arabia began, Ukraine launched its largest drone strike yet on Moscow, a bold, defiant signal that sent ripples through the corridors of power. Is this the act of desperation or the spark that will ignite a dialogue? Later, on a tense Wednesday afternoon at the White House, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt revealed that National Security Advisor Waltz had spoken with his Russian counterpart earlier that day. "The president's team remains deeply engaged," she said. "With our envoy heading to Moscow later this week, we're urging Russia to jump on board with this plan. We're closer to a peace deal than ever, like being on the final stretch in a game, just waiting for Russia to make the winning play." As the world watches with bated breath, the next few moves could reshape the future of peace and conflict. Will these high-stakes negotiations finally lead to a breakthrough, or are we witnessing the calm before a storm of even greater proportions?